morning, everyone. You can't imagine what it's like to follow Annabelle, Doug and Sean, especially with the energy that Sean puts into presentations. But thank you for having me here today. What I want to start with is something that's been a theme in Wellington and Auckland as we've gone around the country, and that is that there is a real energy in New Zealand, and we need to tap into it, and we need to take the innovation through to full commercialisation, which, as Sean said, we haven't done as well as we could as a country. And I think the thing that motivates me is when you live in Europe, as I do now, you hear stories daily of the 60% of kids between 18 and 24 in Southern Europe who don't have jobs and who don't have any prospect of jobs in the next 10 years or so. And I think that's a lost generation that none of us can sit and tolerate. So one of the things I want to raise as just something to think about as I talk is that globally the net highest increase in employment is coming from small to medium enterprise. So since the global recession started, statistically we're seeing that all new employment is coming out of the small to medium enterprises, companies like Doug's, companies like Sean's, companies like you're going to hear about today. So back those companies or create those companies, but just remember that they are as vital to the economy as the big ones that we also love and work with. So a little bit about Systock. What do we do? Well, people find it quite hard to understand the type of company we are because we're a combination of services and products. But we chose long ago to provide our products with our service rather than to separate them. And it's been a really good business model for us globally. We develop programs that lead change. We design business processes, so it may be in an oil industry that we're looking at manufacturing processes or supply chain processes and optimising those processes. That may be followed by redefinition of organisation structures, redesigning roles, maybe it's training, e-learning, mobile learning. So we're building together that package of how can an organisation go through the types of changes that they need to constantly experience. The triggers for change may be a recession. We've all experienced that recently. They may be a merger or an acquisition. It may be legislative driven, or it could be a new system to make the organisation much more productive. And some of our customers at the moment, even though within Britain where I'm based, one would say we are in a deep recession. The recession is as great as it was at the end of World War II and the Great Depression. But actually there is an energy. So one of our customers, Jaguar Land Rover, is constantly hitting the front page of the Financial Times because it's reaching all-time highs in terms of car exports, opening 3 new factories, one in China, one in the UAE and one in Solihull, and also taking over engine redesign from Ford. So it's a really exciting time to be involved. And Systock's involved in that journey, helping them to actually go at the speed they need to go to experience the growth. Some of the other customers we work with are shown there. We work globally within all industries, travel and transportation, banking and finance, oil and gas, as we said, telecommunications. It's really exciting. And I'm going to tell you a little bit about the journey, but one of the things that I'd like to share is people often say to me, how can you still be excited about your job after 25 years? Well, the reason I am is that every day I get up and work with really exciting projects, great people, great teams, and I'll tell you a little bit more about that. The theme of our Inspire New Zealand series today has been how to go from surviving to thriving. And I think there are steps, repeatable steps you can take in any business to do that. And you've heard some of those steps in lessons learnt this morning, and I think if we just keep building on those, that would be great. In terms of my own background, I did a degree in linguistics, but felt that there was still something missing. There was another piece of the jigsaw, so I trained as a commercial pilot. And while doing so, I was self-funding, so you have a quite high motivation to earn enough money to pay for the flying hours. And in that journey of learning to fly, there were lots of things that I felt that I wasn't seeing in the industry jobs that I had at the time. And I worked for absolutely amazing companies, by the way. It was, at the time, IBM and the London Stock Exchange. So both phenomenal companies to work with. But what I was seeing was in the early stages of this growth of explosion of IT, things were happening really fast. And the disciplines that we had in aviation weren't always there. And the disciplines that I could see were end-to-end process excellence. So in an aviation scenario, whether it's taking a concept through design, test, build, wind tunnel testing, test flying, and then taking that plane onto the line, or whether it's me flying you from Auckland to Los Angeles, there is always a process, and that process is so well understood by everyone in the industry. So if I'm a pilot, you may think that's a significant role, but as a pilot, I know I'm just one tiny piece in a very big jigsaw, and that is that I have air traffic controllers and engineers and meteorologists and military airspace people all playing a role in my safety and the safety of the passengers. So I did a test while I was working in these IT roles and asked a number of pilots to draw on a white wall what they thought the end-to-end process for aviation was. Now, none of those people were process analysts, but all of them drew the same process. Didn't matter where we were in the world, didn't matter what language we spoke or what our background was, we all drew the same end-to-end process for aviation because it's so embedded in our training. Simulators are another really key aspect of the aviation industry. So if you have the ability to train someone by simulation, then you can make the mistakes in the simulator rather than in the live scenario. And as long ago as 30 years, we could be training people to fly in a simulator, and I wanted to bring some of that into the business world. And then the third thing is human factors. Again, if you think about aviation, you trust your pilots and you know they're well trained, but human factors in the cockpit is as important to how safe that plane will be. And nowadays, human factors in the cockpit is being taken into operating theatres in the medical world because it's so advanced in its thinking of how important it is that people communicate really effectively when under pressure or in emergency situations. So those three things, human factors, end-to-end process and simulation, were what really became SysDoc. And I never intended to start SysDoc. We now operate globally. We're constantly working around the world in the most exciting and remote locations. But my dream was to fly aeroplanes and be a pilot. So when I found that I had a team of people in a number of the roles we were in, my bosses said, well, if that works so well in aviation, can we just try it in business? And we just tried it, and little by little, SysDoc had 40 staff. So I call myself the accidental entrepreneur, someone who had an idea, really believed that we could change the world, but didn't have any notion of the fact that I really wanted to grow a business. So that was the humble beginnings. Nowadays you can see the link between the end-to-end process, the training, the change management and so on. And we've kept true to those aspects because actually businesses thrive, FTSE 100 businesses right down to startup companies, they thrive if they understand the business model that they want to achieve, if they define it, visualise it, and then work to that model. So, a little story about the reality of running a company. One thing that I knew when I realised the company was growing beyond me was that I did want to have a family. So I looked for role models of how do you be an entrepreneur going global and a mum as well. And in those days, there weren't really that many role models. So like the situation with most entrepreneurs, you have to invent your own ways of doing things if the models aren't existing. And one of the first big contracts that we went for in New Zealand was a very large one. It would have been over $1 million at the time. And actually, Desiree Botica, who's in the audience somewhere today, who's my general manager in Auckland, was with me in the presentation. And we presented to the customer, and the customer said to us, we understand you've got a great product, good service, we love your pricing, we really like what you've put forward, but we can't differentiate between you and your competitor, so you'll need to help us differentiate. And so we said, which we always say to our customers, it's about people and it's about teams. So if you believe that we have the competence and capability, at the end of the day, it's going to be the team that we put working with your people and that energy and dynamic that we get, which will define the success of the project. They then asked us what we thought of our competitors, and we said, we've researched them. They look like we don't know them personally, but they look like a very competent company. So we left the meeting with our fingers crossed. And we were told very shortly after that we'd won the business. And given that there'd been so little between ourselves and the competitors, we asked the customer why they'd chosen us. And they said, well, we asked your competitor the same questions. We told them it was a level playing field and that we needed them to help differentiate. And when we asked them why should we choose you over Systock, they leant back in their chairs and said, oh, them, they're a bunch of part-time mothers. So I think that the nice part of the story is, yes, we're a lot of mums, but actually globally we're 50% female, 50% male now. We did start out being predominantly female because we were inventing the way and trying to chart a course of how can you actually be a really competent, capable female balancing parenthood and still achieve the goals for your customers, which means you've got to mind each other's backs but never let down the customer. And we think that over time we created a model which is the envy actually of a lot of other companies. Last year in the UK we won the Opportunity Now Award for best practices in managing a mobile flexible workforce, and you know, we're really proud of the effort we've had to put in. It's a challenge every day, but now we attract some amazing, incredible, diverse groups of people to work with us. Interestingly, the other company doesn't exist anymore, so worth sharing as well. Now, the second big challenge came for us as a company when I realised that as a founder, as an entrepreneur, if you try and be everything to the company, in the end it will consume you because you work 18-hour days. You have to be there for your client. You need to be constantly innovating, and you're also needing to be the leader for a whole group of people who are working for you, and you realise you just can't do it all. But it's quite hard as an entrepreneur to let go, especially if you love your job and you love your team. So I decided that the only way to achieve separation was to leave, to break the umbilical cord between myself and the company. We took a year of planning to do this, and the deal was that we would have the wonderful Desiree and another lady called Robin Williams who would run the company in my absence, and that I would go, but I would go a long way away so that I wouldn't be tempted to come back and say, do you think we could have done this like this? Which I think, again, we're prone to do. So I went to France with my husband Martin and our then 2 children, and I know one of them's in the audience as well today. And we went off to France and had an experience living in the French Alps. But I think the incredible thing about it is that when you're distant from your company, you've got time to think. You can think about strategy, you can think about the big picture, you can think about what you're good at, and you can actually laugh at what you're not so good at because you're no longer close to it. So you have that time to really re-energise the business. And I realised during that time in France that we just had this incredible business model and we could repeat it globally. But it took me leaving the business and being away from the business to understand it. Before leaving, we did ask our major clients whether they were happy with me leaving, and in the initial conversations, they said, oh, not sure about that. Isn't it Katherine Corich's business? And we said, but truly, when did you last see me? And when they admitted, actually, what they would miss was they would miss the values of the company, and that's what they thought they were losing. And we said, you'll never lose those values. They will always be there. So I went away for a year. In the year I was away, I got one phone call, and it was about an IP question, which path we take. And while I was away, the revenues doubled, the staff were exuberant and able to use their full talents, and the profits doubled, clients were delighted. So there's no negatives for having the courage to stand back. The next big challenge that we had was 2005. We'd been running the business in the UK since '99, and our general manager decided to leave. We had a succession plan in place, but that also fell apart. So we had 3 weeks' notice that we needed to move to England. We did that, Martin and I, and then 4 children. And I can tell you the children weren't pleased with us, leaving a really nice life in New Zealand, which is a fantastic way to grow up, and going to the other side of the world to a postage stamp garden in the middle of London. but we did it. One thing that we did, and I think, again, if you can think differently when you're thinking about globalising a business, we sat down as a family after we'd been in England for a few months. We thought we'd only be there a year. We've actually been there 7. But we sat down as a family and said, what's really important to us? And we all agreed that actually the holidays in Europe sounded really glamorous, but we could only go in school holiday times anyway when it's busy. So we decided we would come back 3 times a year. So for the last 7 years, 1 month at Christmas, 1 month at Easter, and 1 month at August, we've travelled as a family and come home, stayed really connected as Kiwis. The kids have stayed as Kiwis, and Marius is testament to that in deciding to come back to Auckland University. And I worked out the other day that as a family we did 3.2 million miles with Air New Zealand in the last 7 years. So as expats, we've been supporting the New Zealand economy in a really positive way. We create jobs for New Zealand with our business in Jaguar Land Rover, McLaren, Vodafone Group, Reed Elsevier. And we're also getting that opportunity to build the relationships that you have to build in a local market. And I can't stress that enough, that you can't do just quick visits, because you need to understand the pulse and the culture and the language of the market. So now where are we? Well, we're sitting globally on really exciting times, working all around the world on many projects. We can deploy teams anywhere in the world now within 48 hours because we have a repeatable business model. And finally, we grew 40% last year in the recession. So don't read the newspapers that tell you the doom and gloom. Just remember what's inside you and create teams with high energy, good products and services. Take the products and services to the market and celebrate the New Zealand companies where people are doing the difficult things and going outside their comfort zones to make job creation happen in New Zealand. So I've got a few messages on the slides which I think will be made available to you, but the key message, and I just can't stress this enough to all of you, New Zealand does have so many things about our country that we need to celebrate. And there are so many lessons among the group of world-class New Zealanders today and within the audience where you know that we can take wonderful ideas to the world. And I would encourage you to support New Zealand companies and to become part of those companies that are trying to take our brand globally. Thank you.